Hello and welcome to Sky Photo Trip tutorial. This tutorial is about deep sky processing, and the first step after deep sky processing is something that we call the stretch. When you have your light frames, dark frames and flat frames, during the process of stacking you have converted the raw files, then you have calibrated. The next step is to Bayer interpolate, then normalize, then you have graded your light frames, finally aligned and stacked. After stacking you get a single image, and then you do single image processing to bring out your deep sky object. And the first step in single image processing is the stretch. In the Sky Photo Trip 15th folder repository, we have a folder which contains 102 files of the pair of galaxies M81 and M82 in Ursa Major. All these files along with the darks and the flats were combined and stacked together to result in a single file. The software used was Images Plus, and using that software we got a file, the name of which is combined, and it is in the FIT format. The same file and the same software of Images Plus was used to convert the FIT file into a TIFF file also. In this video I am going to show you two methods of performing the stretch, first in Images Plus and then in Photoshop. Let us open the file in Images Plus. You can select the type of file as fits and open the combined fit file in the folder M81 M82. At the moment the file looks devoid of any detail and color. To bring up the stretch window, which is also known as the digital development window, I press Ctrl D on my keyboard. The window comes up, and the first slider that we have to move is the breakpoint slider. At the moment the slider values are 0 on the left and 65,535 on the right. I am going to change the range of the slider from 65,000 to 500. That means now the leftmost point is 0 and the rightmost point is 500. If I click on this slider, you can see that the galaxies appear, but the background is still very dark. I can move the slider towards left to an approximate value of 250. This brings out the galaxies even more. If I move the slider even more aggressively towards the left to, let's say, a value of about 200, and further I move the slider even more to 150, now we see that some kind of artifacts start to appear in the corner of the image. So we back off a little bit to about 200 till the point where the artifacts on the corner of the image are completely gone. The next slider that we have to move is called the background weight, which will add brightness to the background of the image. So I move the slider towards left little by little, and the purpose of the slider is to uniformly brighten up the background. At the moment you can see that at the bottom of the image there is a dark portion which we can remove by moving the background slider even further. Finally, the third slider, we move the scale function to nth power, x to the power n, and increase the exponent. Move the slider towards right to bring out the contrast in the image. Although the background is not actually dark, I will leave it over here so that we have some leeway in processing at a later stage. The second tab of the digital development window is called color and sharpness. To use the red, green and blue sliders, first I am going to make the image zoom to 100% and bring up a galaxy in the center of the image. Here you can see that all the stars already have a red fringe. The reason for this red fringe is that focus of the instrument HyperStar was not exactly accurate. It was slightly off, and you can see that all the stars have got a red fringe. If the focus had been correct, the red fringes would not have been present. So in fact now we have to reduce these red fringes, and we move the red slider for this particular image in an opposite way. Usually we would move this red slider towards right to bring out the color in the image, but in this case, to remove these red fringes, we are moving the slider towards left. Now you can see that the red color has reduced. I'm going to move the slider even further, as well as the blue slider. If you zoom into this image, you can see that a little bit all the stars have a little dot in the center. Again, the reason of this dot in the center is the shadow of the diagonal in the shadow of the camera in our optic system, because the focus was not exactly perfect. So after you are finished with this, you press done, and this is a function which we call stretch, the first function that we perform on the single image. I am going to demonstrate the stretch function in Photoshop also. So open the image, the TIFF image that we saved directly after stacking from the Images Plus software, and here is the image. Again, as you can see that it is devoid of any nebula or color. If I press Ctrl L on the keyboard, you can see that the histogram is gathered into a very thin spike. To stretch this image in Photoshop, I am going to use the curves window by pressing Ctrl M on the keyboard. You can also get the curves window by using image adjustment and curves. So here again the histogram is displayed, and it is a very thin line. I make a selection point on the curve right in the middle and move that selection point towards the left, in an effect that the curve is now cutting across the histogram in an oblique fashion. But as a result of which, the curve has now moved into a saturation point across the whole dynamic range. So we need to avoid this. The effect of this in the image is that the core of the galaxy is now overexposed, as well as the core of the stars are also overexposed. So we make another point on the curve and move this point rightwards, so that a kind of shape is formed, which is a sort of knee shape. This is the shape of the curve that we need in Photoshop to stretch our images. This upper point should not be the curving downwards, or it should not be touching the upper portion, the saturated point, but it should be leading straight from this selected point to the top right corner of the curve window. Now another iteration of, we press Ctrl L, and now you can see in the histogram that the leftmost portion of the histogram does not contain any data, and we are going to move the black points rightwards just to a little bit where the data starts to appear. Now performing another iteration of the stretch, I press Ctrl M, and select a point in the middle of the curve and move it leftwards, again in an effort. You can also move this black point a little bit towards the right, and again avoiding the saturation, we make the same kind of curve like a knee in the curves window. And finally, if you press Ctrl L, you can take the black point rightwards to have the background a little bit darker. So here we are. The galaxies now appear nicely. We have to perform other functions, but this is how we do the stretching in Images Plus and Photoshop. Thank you.